I thank you guys for continuing to allow me back. This is home. This is a place that has my heart. And we're going to talk today that God's not finished. God's not finished with you. God's not finished with me. And God is sure not finished with Park Ridge. It's gonna be a little uncomfortable. We're going to talk about a couple of things. And my goal is not to manufacture anything. My thing is that God spoke to me when Pastor M.S. Donna asked me to speak. Literally, God gave me clearly two messages. I wasn't able to preach the one last week, but that's God's will. So today, we're going to talk about God is not finished. Turn to your neighbor, say, God's not finished. Now, the reason I want you to say it, and we're going to talk about this here in a few minutes, is what you say matters. And so when you speak life, not only to other people, but on yourself, you start to believe it. You know, they say a lot of times, if you tell yourself a lie over and over again, you'll start to believe that lie. It's the same thing when you start telling yourself great things about yourself and about what God says you are, who God says you are, and what God has prepared and planned for you, you start to believe it. So there's going to be several times today where I'm going to tell you, God's not finished. But I'm going to make you repeat it, that God's not finished. Because until you believe it, it don't matter. God is not finished. He's not finished working in you. He's not finished working for you. He's not finished on your story. He's not finished in your marriage. He's not finished with your kids. He's not finished in your business. He's not finished in your dreams. He's not finished in your relationships. God's not finished yet. If you're still breathing, He's still working. He's up to something. And if you haven't seen that breakthrough yet, I'm here to tell you that God's not finished, that you just need to wait. You just need to follow what He's telling you to do, and you'll see that breakthrough. It may not be in the way that you want it to be seen, but you'll see it. Because God is not finished. Say it. God is not finished.
God is not finished.
Have you ever had a time in your life where you've been depressed, discouraged, defeated? Some might be in this room right now feeling those exact same feelings. The feelings of discouragement, depression, anxiety, defeat, sadness, loneliness. We've all been there. Some of us are already there. We've been there when we feel like God is finished with us. When we wonder where God is. When we feel like God is finished with us or our family or even our church. I could go on and on and on. God is not finished. Here's the thing, our words shape our attitude. When we realize that our words have power, you can begin to walk in and live a victorious life. But you cannot live a victorious life with a defeated mouth. You cannot live a life walking in victory with God with a defeated mouth. It just will not happen. You can't live a positive life with a negative mouth. You want to change your life? You got to change your speaking. And when you change your speaking, you start changing your thinking. See, so many times in this world right now, We are a negative mindset, negative-based society. And I hate to say it, but the church can be some of the most negative people. And I don't say that to cast judgment or to make you feel any certain type of way. When I say the church, I'm talking about myself as well. We've been taught, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. God's telling you he's for you, and if he's for you, who can be against you? We got to start walking in that victory. We got to start walking in that promise that God never fails. They just sing about it. The God who never fails. If you believe that, first of all, if you sing it, you better believe it. Don't get up and sing something you don't believe. God's not finished. If you want to change your thinking, you've got to change your speaking. Look, I've been there several times in my life. Whether it was when my mom or my dad passed away. When my sister had a stillborn, and I'm thinking, standing there going, God, what are we doing? When this church went through what it went through, when we didn't have leaders, thinking, God, are you done? God, are you finished? I felt like there was no place to turn. I've been there several times in my life. And it's funny because just about every time God interrupts my pity party and he says, change your confession, change your mindset. I'll never forget it. And I've mentioned it in here before. My sister was pregnant with twins and had one at 24 weeks and one was stillborn at 24 weeks. The one at 24 weeks was 1 pound and 3 ounces. Kind of puts it into perspective. My wife is 27 weeks this week. And we aren't ready. And he isn't ready. And I remember standing in the NICU and praying, God, why? God, why? And he interrupts my pity party with the sounds of beeps, buzzes, dings, just all the medical equipment. And one of the doctors that came over said, I just want to let you know, this baby's in good hands because of everything that we're able to do that we weren't able to do 10 years ago. They walked. They walked in that victory because God gave them the opportunity. And they stepped through the door. They kicked that wall down. From that point forward, I knew he was in good hands. Because I knew God said, break this pity party up. Change your mindset. Change your confession. We have to remember that we are here on purpose, that we are here for a purpose. Even if you feel like you don't have a purpose, I'm here to tell you, if only thing I'm here to tell you today is you have a purpose. Whether or not you know it right now, you were put here for a purpose. You are here on purpose. There is no consequences with God. Not consequences, sorry. There are no happenings with God. Everything's on purpose. Not only do you have to remember that you're on purpose, but you've got to have an open heart. even when your heart feels closed, even when your heart is walled with depression, with insecurities, with fears, when you don't trust anyone, you don't feel like there's anyone you can trust. When your heart is so walled up with those things, you got to confess it to God. Change your mindset and get ready. Why? Because God's not finished yet. He is bigger than your circumstance. He is bigger than your problem. He is bigger than your storm. He is bigger than your negative mouth. He is bigger than anything. And when we can realize that, when we can accept that, when we can walk in that, you better get ready. Because God will explode. Look, I'm here to tell you, God's not finished with Chris. God's not finished with you. God's not finished with your family. God's not finished with Park Ridge Baptist Church. I'm going to repeat that again. God is not finished with Park Ridge Baptist Church. And if you sit here and you think, God, where are you? God, what are you doing? Then you know what? It's time for you to get out of that pity party. It's time for you to walk in that victory and say, God's not finished yet. Turn to Philippians 1, verse 6. Paul, the apostle here, wrote this scripture late in his life. He was a guy that believed God. He was a guy that walked with God. He was a guy that always looked to God no matter the circumstance. No matter what was going on, he knew God was working. He knew God was working on him. And that the God that was working on him was up to something. Even when he was down to nothing. Philippians 1 verse 6 says, being confident in this, that he who began a good work in you, in me, in Park Ridge, in your family, in your marriage, in your job, in whatever circumstance you're in, will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. It doesn't say that he might. It says, have confidence. Have confidence that what he began in you, he will finish. Look, guys, it's time for us to get our confidence back. It's time for us to get our swagger back and say, you know what? I don't care what's going on in the world. I got confidence because the God who created everything is for me. So I don't care who's against me. Some of us in here, we've lost our confidence. Because life has kicked you right between the nose or eyes. Look, if you got two noses, I don't want to see it. Some of us have lost our confidence because God has kicked us square in the teeth. Not God, life. Life has kicked us square in the teeth. And maybe you weren't ready for it. Maybe you hadn't planned for it. I'm a planner. 90% of the arguments that Hillary and I have is because she is spontaneous and I'm the planner, and it doesn't mesh well sometimes. We have now had this big calendar. It's probably about this long, about this tall, on the wall in the kitchen. And if it ain't on the calendar, it ain't happening. Just is what it is. Saves us some heartache. Saves us some arguing. But maybe you weren't ready when life kicked you in the teeth. Maybe you weren't ready when you got that bad diagnosis. Maybe you weren't ready when you woke up that morning. Maybe you weren't ready when your world turned upside down. That's okay. Maybe you felt overwhelmed by whatever life threw at you. Listen, this might be God's way of whispering to you, I'm not finished. Your story is still being written. This isn't the final scene. This isn't the final chapter. Your scoreboard doesn't say zeros. God's telling you, I'm not finished. A breakthrough is on the way. You see, some in here have even declared, I'm stuck. I'm stuck at my job. My marriage seems to be just stuck. I'm stuck in my walk with Christ. I want to tell you, you aren't stuck. You've just stopped. You aren't stuck. You've just stopped. Thing is I can say right here, I'm stuck. I can't get down because this is in my way. I'm not stuck anymore. It's because I stopped trying. It's because I stopped walking. It's because I stopped living in my purpose. Look, I'm here to tell you today, if you think you're stuck, you're not stuck. You've just stopped. If your marriage is stuck, it's because you've stopped trying. If your walk with Christ is stuck, it's because you've stopped doing what you know you're supposed to do. If Park Ridge is stuck, it's not that you're stuck. It's that you stopped. You stopped doing what you know is what you're supposed to do. You're not stuck. You've stopped. You're not stuck in your addiction. You're not stuck in your marriage. You're not stuck in this church. You're not stuck in your walk in your relationship with God. This isn't as good as it gets. This isn't as good as your walk can be. This isn't as good as Park Ridge can be. This isn't as good as your marriage can be. This isn't as good as your job could be. This isn't as good as your family can be. No. I'm here to tell you that God's not finished yet. But until you believe it, you will never step into it. Until you believe it, you will never step into it. Your internal condition determines your external capacity. Your internal condition determines your external capacity. What does that mean? I didn't create it. Those are two big words that are not usually in my vocabulary. What it means is what you say to yourself, what you believe determines what you can hold, determines where you can go, determines how you walk in your purpose. If you're not walking in the purpose that God's given you, it's because your internal condition is not where it needs to be. You've got to believe it inside of here and inside of here before you can ever walk into it. Many of us have told our kids, just believe in yourself. If you dream it, if you believe it, you can achieve it, you can do it. Sometimes we told our kids that and we forgot to remind ourselves. It's easier to give others the advice than it is to walk in it yourself. And I'm telling you that because I've had experience with that. I still struggle with that. I can tell you what to do sometimes much better than I can do it. It's because I believe in you, but I don't believe in me. See, so many times, everybody wants to give advice. And most advice is pretty good. Problem is when you give someone advice that you need to take yourself, who are you helping and who are you hurting? Proverbs 23:7 says, as he thinks within himself, so is he. As a man thinketh, he is. if you don't get your heart ready for what God wants you or wants for you, you can hear the greatest message ever. You can see the best miracle ever happen. You aren't ready to receive it because your heart's not ready. You can have all the opportunities in the world, but you will not go for them because you disqualify yourself by your own small thinking and negative mindset. See, it's not an ability problem. It's a mindset problem. We have such a small mindset. And it starts with us putting God in a box. There are many people that think, well, God can do what I think he can do in this little box. God's like, okay. I can do that. I can do a whole lot more too. I can move mountains. But that's all you think I can do? We'll do it. Look, if all you think Park Ridge can be is what it is right now, you got small thinking. Small thinking. If you think it's good enough right now, small thinking. This is why some of you have stopped. Something has made you feel like you aren't good enough to keep going. You aren't good enough to raise your kids the right way. You aren't good enough to tell that person about Jesus. You aren't worthy to step into that role. It's horse malarkey. It is. You stop because the way wasn't what you were expecting it to be. It's harder than you thought it would be. Some of us have stopped in a season in our life that we feel stuck. This is when we need to turn to God and say, I know you make a way where there is no way. I know you aren't finished yet. In Isaiah 43, God promises to make a way in the wilderness where there seems to be no way. This is not the final scene. This is not the final chapter. This is not the scoreboard hitting zeros. You know why? Because God's not finished yet. Turn to the other neighbor and say, God's not finished yet. All right, so there was a guy. You know, I love stories. There was a guy in the early 1900s. His name was Henry. Now, Henry had a vision. He wanted to be an inventor. He was born into a poor family, so he thought God couldn't use him. Couldn't do much through him because his family was poor. So he got a regular job. He moved into a small house that had a shed in the back. He kept his tools out there. He went out there and pitied around. But he never gave up his dream of being an inventor. He was really into travel. So he said one day, I'll see if I can help people get to places faster. He had a bicycle and he's like, bicycle's pretty good, but I think we can do it faster. He took a bicycle and wanted to make it better, wanted to make it faster. So he started to draw things out. He came up with something with 4 wheels, a motor. He called it a quadricycle. Today we call it a car, truck, SUV. He built this thing all up in his shed. When he got ready to take it for his first ride, he realized that the door wasn't wide enough for him to drive it out. He was stuck. He wasn't stuck. You know what he did? He took an axe. He took an axe to the frame, to the bricks. He drove that sucker right out of the building. See, where he thought he was stuck, he found a way. He could have said, I'm stuck, and stopped. But you know what? Some of us are in the same boat. We see a way out. We just don't want to do it. We don't want to put in the work. We don't want to put in the time, put in the effort. Within 10 years of him driving that quadricycle out, he had made 10 million Model T Fords. 10 million Model T Fords. Now, when I was doing my research and reading up on Henry Ford, I realized that, you know what was called the Model T Ford? He actually started with Model A, and he failed. And he went to Model B, and he failed. And he went to Model C, and he failed. And he went all the way down to T when he had some success. He wasn't stuck. He didn't stop. He kept walking in the purpose that God had given him, that the dream that God had given him. Went on to be a millionaire way before his time. Ford Motor Company wouldn't be Ford Motor Company if he would have just said, I'm stuck, I'm going to stop. So, how do we do this? Well, sometimes we need a little spiritual encouragement. Yeah, that was just my introduction. It's going to go quicker, I promise. Here's the thing. Jeremiah the prophet knew that sometimes people need some spiritual encouragement. So he told a story of the potter's wheel. Now, I got a 3-minute video. It's a countdown video, but it summed it up best. But let's read. No, go ahead. There you go. Turn the volume up. I want you to pay attention here. I've always been a fan of pottery. Church I was saved in, the senior adult ministry had a pottery ministry. They had a bunch of wheels. They had the kiln, I think it's how it's pronounced. They did the painting, they did the glaze. It was amazing. But I want to take a few minutes, I want to break down this video. First of all, I want to read from Jeremiah chapter 18, verses 1 through 6. It says, "This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Go down to the potter's house, and there I will give you my message." So I went down to the potter's house, and I saw him working at the wheel. But the pot he was shaping from clay was marred in his hands. So the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as it seemed best to him. Then the word of the Lord came to me. He said, "Can I not do with you, Israel, as this potter does? Declares the Lord, like clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hand, Israel." See, I want to take a few minutes in this video to show you how everything you are going through is preparing you to step into what God has for you. See, the potter taught Jeremiah a lesson about Israel and how God could collect their brokenness, how he could remold it, how he could make it into something that people with the hearts of flesh instead of stone, because he's not finished yet. First thing I want to point out is that the clay isn't ready until water and pressure are applied. The clay isn't ready until water and pressure are applied. Now, in case you don't understand my analogy here, you are the clay. You are not ready until water and pressure is applied. See, at first, when you're watching that video and you see them kneading the clay, you see them applying pressure. I was a little surprised by the pressure that they used on the clay. Notice that the clay wasn't ready to go straight from the bag to the wheel. It had to go through a preparing process, had to go through a pressure process. The potter kneaded the clay, squeezed it, saturated it to prepare it for shaping. It didn't have immediate form. It needed some time. It needed some water before it could look like anything special. You see, if you were to just take that clay out of the bag, put it on the wheel, without kneading it, without applying pressure, without applying water, it would crumble. You wouldn't be able to form it into anything. Same way, we crumble if we don't have enough God. If we don't have enough faith. If we don't have enough water. Genesis says that God formed us in his image and molded us into his likeness. I like to think whenever I'm thinking of God in the early days as a potter, muddy hands, creating human beings. See, this means that God is still working on us. He's shaping us towards a wholeness, towards a oneness, towards a holiness. Sometimes we got to go through the kneading process. We got to go through the pressure process. We got to go through some stuff before God can make us, form us, and shape us into what he wants us to be. There are times in life where you feel like the pressure is too much. where the storms are too heavy. I assure you that God is at work. He's pushing. He's kneading that clay into the proper position to create something amazing. Clay isn't ready till water pressure is applied. Number two, clay can be pretty messy. I don't know if you've ever worked with clay. Clay can be pretty messy. I was actually, my wife stopped me. So I was actually going to buy some clay, and I was going to roll my sleeves up and do this. She said, Chris, you don't know what you're doing. You're going to make more of a mess, and you're going to distract from what God's trying to say. I said, yes, ma'am. But clay can be messy. How many of you can admit life is messy? Life is messy. I don't know about y'all, my life can sometimes turn really messy. I'm going to tell you right now, never believe someone who says their life isn't messy. Never believe them. Because either they're lying, sleeping, or just crazy. Life can be messy. But yet, we desire to put this perception out there that everything's okay. I'm clean. As you can see, look at these hands. It's messy. We all know people who portray the ideal life, the perfect life, perfect family, perfect job, perfect church on social media. But we know deep inside, something's missing. It's messy. Sometimes we feel like a warped piece of pottery instead of a perfect masterpiece. I finally accepted that there's nothing wrong with imperfection. These days, I'm striving more for vulnerability instead of perfection. I'm striving that people know who I am, what I am. Dirty, messy, sinner, saved by grace, and God's not finished. God didn't give up on Israel because of imperfection. God didn't give up on you because of imperfection. Promise you, He's not going to give up. So this leads me to another point. Number 3. It's never too late to begin again. Now, some might say, hold on, what you talking about here? What you talking about, Willis? Accidents can happen. There is no perfect day. There is no perfect marriage. There is no perfect family. There is no perfect job. There is no perfect church. We're all messy. And it's never too late to begin again. Same way there's no perfect person, there is no perfect clay. As you can see right here, the clay caved in on itself, spun, lopsided on the wheel, and this is what we get. You know what they do? You know what they do when this happens? Start all over. What's our text say right here? So I went down to the potter's house and I saw him working at the wheel. But the pot he was shaping from clay was marred. It was messed up. It was crumbling. It was defective. Did he just throw it away? No. It says, so the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as it seemed best to him. Sometimes, when the pressures of life push, we cave in on ourselves. We can spiral out of control. When the piece you're making falls apart, you don't just throw it away. You start over. He could have blamed it on something. Potter could have said, well, this clay wasn't warm enough. You know what? I wasn't playing the right music when this clay fell apart. You know what? I wasn't reading from the right Bible when the clay fell apart. I could go on and on. That's a different sermon for a different day. Prophet Jeremiah saw a broken piece of pottery on God's table. But he said God selected that brokenness. He reformed it. And he recreated something new from the broken pieces. That should give us confidence. That even when our hearts shatter into a million pieces, God can take our pain. He can take our fear. He can take our guilt. He can take our grief. He can take our depression. He can take our anxiety. And he can transform that broken piece to a masterpiece. Notice that the prophet said the broken pottery became better than it was before it fell, before it shattered, before he had to start all over. There is no perfect clay. Just like I said, there's no perfect relationship, family, marriage, church, job, whatever. But it's never too late to appreciate the beauty in the flaws. That leads me to my last point. Imperfections are opportunities. Imperfections are opportunities. Let me tell you something. If we all looked the same, sounded the same, enjoyed the same stuff, this would be a boring world. If every single one of y'all could agree on the same music, the same curriculum, the same church times, the same this, that, and the other, it'd be a boring church. I promise you. The beauty is in the imperfection. And imperfections are opportunities. You see, there's an art in Japan. This art in Japan is called kintsugi. It's a unique way to fix pottery. What they do is they take a really nice pottery and they drop it. It cracks. It cracks. See, in Japan, people often inherit pottery from family members. So when a meaningful piece breaks, they don't discard it. They don't throw it away. They treat it the way God treats it. They don't throw it away because it's broke, because it's got a blemish, because it's got a hole in it. You know what they do? They collect the pieces together. They repair the pottery. They don't use an invisible glue. They don't try to make it look perfect. They don't try to make it look like nothing had ever happened. They take this special kind of tree sap. Here in America, we call it lacquer. And they mix it with gold. They leave it with vulnerability. They leave it with cracks. They leave it with holes. Now, I don't know if you can see inside of this. There is no cracks and holes on the inside. Only what you see on the outside. They understand that scars are a sign of refinement. And the gift of imperfection is credibility. Then they carefully join the fractured pieces together with gold. The gold in the sap makes the pieces stronger than it was before it fell. Hear the words that the prophet says. First piece crumbled in the potter's hand, but he made it into another piece that pleased him more. You see, with God, scars, imperfections, brokenness become stories of triumph and grace. They're stories where God turns the lead to gold, and things become greater than they ever were before they broke. It don't matter. It doesn't matter if it broke. God can put it back together. You know, you can look at it and say, well, this piece is me, and this piece is this family, and this piece is this family, and this piece is this family, and this is a church that can be put back together with gold that is stronger than it ever was before, that is more beautiful than it ever was before, that is stronger than it ever was before. And it's because we didn't just discard the broken pieces. We didn't just take them and say we're done with them. Instead, we put them back together because we walked in the victory and the purpose that God called us to walk in. So we have to remember that God's going to finish what he started if we allow him to. We're going to hit rough patches. Life's going to punch us in the teeth. We can't give up. We can't give in. The game isn't over. We can't have negative thinking. Can't have negative mouths. Our words shape our attitude. God's not finished with you, Lev. So we got to let him do it. You see, this piece right here, it's not real gold, but it signifies something. It signifies that no matter what, God's not done. And that he can take our brokenness, he can take the anxiety, he can take the depression, he can take the discouragement. He can take the defeat. He can take all those things and he can make it into something that is beautiful. I don't know about y'all, but if I had just a regular piece of pottery that was painted the blue, that'd be pretty. But this, it's even more beautiful because it has a story. Same way that each and every single one of you have a story. Same way, Park Ridge Baptist Church has a story. It's filled with broken people. Families filled with broken people. But if we allow God to do it, he'll put us back together, stronger, more beautiful than it ever was before. See, you might be in here for the first time today. You might be here every week. I don't know what everyone's going through. I can't tell you what's going on. But I can tell you, it isn't too big for God. Jason, come up here. Brittany, come here. See, past couple months hadn't been as easy. There's been a lot going on. I don't need to go into all the details. You guys all know. But with the power of God, with the love of family and friends and a church, there was a lot of brokenness. But if we let God, He'll put it back together, stronger, more beautiful than it ever was. So this is yours. Put it in the new house. I promise you, God's not finished yet. He's not finished with y'all. He's not finished with you, and He's not finished with Park Ridge Baptist Church. Change your thinking. Change your words. And God can use it to create something so strong that nothing could ever stop it. Thank y'all. As they play, heard anything big? I hope this message has done a couple things. I hope it showed you that we don't have to be perfect, but that we have to know who the perfect Savior is. I hope this has shown you that we have to embrace the vulnerabilities, that we have to embrace the imperfections as opportunities. I hope you realize that it's never too late to begin again. Life is messy. You are not stuck. It's just time to start again. Because I promise you, God isn't finished with you yet. This altar is open as they play.